to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is Jonathan Gottschall, Ph.D., teaches English at Washington and Jefferson College, the author-editor of 5 books. His work has been featured in the New York Times Magazine, the journal Nature, and Scientific American, and is the author of The Storytelling Animal. What story have you been telling lately? Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, what do you mean when you say that we are addicted to telling the story?
Well, the big premise of the book is that humans are storytelling animals. That a story is a natural product as much as a cultural product. We read novels, we watch films, we listen to songs, which are often in story form. When we're not consuming stories made up by others, we're making up our own. We dream richly and vividly. These little stories we tell ourselves in our dreams. We fantasize. Our children play a story naturally. You don't have to be bribed to do it. You don't have to bribe them to make believe like you have to bribe them to eat their broccoli. The story is for humans as sort of natural and reflexive as breathing.
Why would it be like that? I mean, you made a very eloquent point that there's an evolutionary source for human beings, that we need to tell the story. Could you explain that?
Well, this is a big evolutionary riddle because it's not obvious. I mean, the obvious answer, why do we tell stories? Well, fiction gives us joy. It's pleasurable. We escape it. We like it. But it's easy to say that fiction gives us joy. It's harder to say why. It's not biologically obvious that fiction should give us joy in the same way that, for instance, sex or food give us joy. So there's multiple plausible answers to this question, and they're not mutually exclusive. So some of these different answers could all be correct. One of the ideas that I explore in the book is that fiction gives us an entryway into a vivid virtual reality simulation, usually of problem situations. Fiction is almost always about trouble, about problems. And this is true of dreams and children's play as well. And so one of the big ideas floating around right now is that the reason people have fiction, the reason we have it all around the world, the reason that it always follows the same sort of problem structure is that stories are a way of training. They give us a vicarious experience. They allow us to see what it would be like to do something dangerous, to seduce someone's spouse, to confront a powerful man. And the hero of the story dies in our place.
I happen to really like that concept of simulation. In stress management, Jonathan, we make an important point that watching, let's say, a movie, if you don't have time to read a book, helps you to work out the problem that a character might have. Right. It's a
very similar idea.
It's more objective. Also, do you find that certain stories are universal, those archetypal
Absolutely.
images?
Yes. One of the things I was most fascinated with in my research was exactly this. I mean, we sort of know, it's almost a cultural cliche that stories are about conflict, but once I got into the research, you go across cultures, into radically different sorts of cultures. You go into India and the jungles of Africa, and to Inuit tribesmen, and to modern Western societies. You find the same astonishing thing wherever you go and whenever you go there, that stories are about trouble. Stories are about problems. They're about heroes seeking to overcome some kind of predicament in their life. And they're never about small things either. They're always about sort of the great predicaments of human life. How to survive, how to find an appropriate mate. They're not about having the flu. They're not about driving to work, unless those things can be tied to the great human plights. So stories are about the big human plights, and they're about problems and heroes seeking to overcome. And I think that's really amazing that this pattern emerges holistically, naturally, in all human societies.
I also find, and you make the same point in your book, that stories are moral teachers. They're for edification. They're for keeping us in line. Religion, right?
Sure. Well, I mean, this is one of the great debates, and the debate goes back at least as far as Plato. And Plato, in the Republic, wants to throw all fiction writers, all poets, all dramatists out of his ideal republic, because he thinks that fiction degrades the moral fabric of society. And throughout time, there's been sort of moral panic about this, about the way that novels or comic books or films or TV or video games now are corrupting the youth and degrading society. And I think people have that exactly wrong. They jump to that conclusion because the subject matter of fiction often is morally repellent behavior. But morally repellent behavior is always judged as such. The protagonists embody good, pro-social, decent, selfless behavior, and antagonists who are embody the opposite. So there is a lot of bad behavior in fiction, but we're always put in position to judge that bad behavior.
It's interesting that you say that. For instance, Oscar Wilde. Let's take him. Mm-hmm. And when he wrote the portrait of Dorian Gray, that could be looked upon, oh, what a scandalous book, and this guy is so self-indulgent. It's quite a moral book.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a moral allegory. I mean, the message of that book is don't be a jerk. Don't be like Dorian.
And you're going to wither and die at the end.
You will wither and die. Yes, it will corrupt you. It'll ruin you.
Yes.
And that sort of morality tale structure. Dorian Gray is a classic morality tale, but that sort of morality tale structure is deeply embedded in the fiction impulse. So again, wherever you go, whenever you go there, the predominant pattern in fiction is poetic justice. And good guys get what they deserve. A happy ending, bad guys get what they deserve.
The Bible is violent, right?
A disaster.
Mm-hmm. The Bible is violent. The Greeks, boy, they told everything and anything.
Sure, and you even look at the tales that children tell, and the tales that we tell to children. They tend to be very moralistic tales that teach kids, how to live, what's the proper way to behave in our society.
Yes, and I was really fascinated by a lot of the comments that you recorded dealing with children's, I guess, synopsis of their stories. I want to touch on that. We're going to commercial break, and we will return with Professor Jonathan Gottschall, author of The Storytelling Animal.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Life, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Professor Jonathan Gottschall, author of The Storytelling Animal. Okay, Jonathan, before commercial break, we were touching on those upright barbarians. known as children, telling their little stories that depict anarchy and violence. How come? And could you give us an example? They were so cute in the book.
Oh yeah, I love this part of the research. You know, my own little girls were 4 and 7 during the main period I wrote this book, and so I had these wonderful examples of children's play right in front of me. It was like being a psychologist with my own little lab. I was watching these little kids make up these incredible worlds all the time. Here's what really struck me about children's pretend play. First off, it progresses in developmental stages, just like walking does or talking. They develop sophistication in regular developmental stages. We have a tendency as adults to misremember what Neverland is like, the land of make-believe. We kind of remember it as sort of a sun-kissed bunny land, you know, this happy place, sort of like Mr. Rogers' land of make-believe. That's not really what it's like. If you look closely at it, the storylands of children are full of trouble. Bad things go wrong all the time. People get hurt. Evil is afoot. And children are always having to sort of confront bad forces, to flee from it, to fight it. And so, yeah, there's great illustrations in the book of children's pretend play and how dark it can be. There's a story I tell, a transcript of where a little girl is rocking a cradle, and the cradle is empty, and someone says to her, "Why are you rocking that empty cradle?" And she says, "Well, my baby went away." And she says to another boy, "Can you look in the forest?" And the boy starts looking around in the forest for the child, and there's a sort of sand table, and he starts digging in the sand, digging for the baby. And she says, "Oh, my baby's not in the hole. Not my baby, not my baby." And the boy finally finds her, and she says, "Oh, good, you finded her." But you know, she had this very close scrape with the death of her child. And so children are involved in these sorts of really intense problems when they're in the story world.
How come?
Well, again, this is one of the few areas of storytelling that I think is relatively uncontroversial. Humans aren't the only animals that play. Animal play is very widespread, especially in the smart animals. And generally, biologists agree that what animals are doing is they're preparing for adult life. They're building their strength physically. They're building their social abilities, and that's what developmental psychologists think is going on with children's play. They're rehearsing for adult life. They're rehearsing for the problems they're going to face as adults. They're building social and emotional intelligence. One of the questions I explore in the book is it possible that that's what we're doing in stories too? That we never really leave Neverland. We change how we play, we change how we pretend, but that novels and films, these are all provinces of Neverland still, and they might serve the same function. It's basically kind of a rehearsal for the problems that we confront in ordinary life.
Wouldn't you also say that children are perhaps acting out their fears and insecurity?
Definitely, yeah. I think any explanation that's like it's this and nothing else is going to be too rigid and unlikely to be correct. But certainly, I think that's true as well.
Now, what's the role of patterns? I thought that was a wonderful point that you made in the storytelling animal, how we need to make up a story about a string of things that happen, maybe clean from the purpose of what the story, the facts are.
Yeah. So there's some neat neuroscience about this, and basically suggests that we have a set of circuits in our left brain. And I kind of think of this set of circuits like a little man who lives in my brain, like an inch above and behind your left eye. And this little man's job is to sift through all of the data, all of the information that's constantly rivering into your brain through your senses. And his job is to sort through all that information and turn it into story patterns to find the order in the chaos. The problem with the storytelling mind, the problem with this little man, is that he's addicted to meaning. He's allergic to uncertainty. And if he can't find a story in the world, he's likely to make one up. We have a very limited ability not to make up a story when we see random, unpatterned information. So I think one of the experiments you're talking about is you have 3 unrelated sentences. I'll say them very quickly. Todd went to the store. Judy stayed in bed all day. Abe walked the dog. Those are 3 random sentences that I just made up. But if you give those sentences to lab subjects, they will immediately start trying to find the hidden story. They'll immediately start trying to weave a narrative that puts those pieces of information together into a plausible story. They basically invent a story. They're inventing a fiction.
And that's why I think, because we have this need to self-justify, there is no truth, really. It's all based on our imagination.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's very hard to get a handle on what is real, what isn't, based on our storytelling mind, correct?
I think that's true. One lesson of the book is that you have to be very wary of your storytelling mind, because it's a very good storyteller, and the stories that it tells are very plausible, and we believe in them, whether they're true or false. One good example of this would be memory research. So we think of our memories as very stable and real, that we can sort of cue up a videotape of our past, and it can give us an accurate reflection of what really happened. But when memory researchers look into this, they don't find that. They find that our memories are much less trustworthy than we think. The best examples of this are so-called flash bulb memory research. So on 9/11, we all have this very vivid, deeply etched memory of exactly what happened, where we were, how we heard, how we felt. But they've done studies on this, and we're extremely confident in these memories, but almost all of us are misremembering key elements of those attacks and what went on in them. And so there's a sense in which, if we can't trust our memories about our past, what basis do we have for believing anything in our lives is exactly as we expect it to be? Yeah. So there is an unsettling element to this research. It makes us feel less stable, less real, more like figments of our own imagination.
And in a way we are. You said something very fascinating in the book about happiness, and that the people who tell themselves the best lies are the happiest people. We're going to come back to that notion, but we're going to commercial break, and we will return with Professor Jonathan Gottschall, author of The Storytelling Animal. Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is the message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers. We're back with the storytelling animal, Jonathan. Now, so what is this? I am a happy person, and I'll tell you that I live a rich, imaginative life, and now I know. I tell myself flattering stories.
Yeah. Well, this is neat stuff. Okay, so psychologists have identified this tendency in almost all people, almost all of us, to tell ourselves flattering lies. They call this the Lake Wobegon effect. It's the feeling that almost all of us have, that we are above average in almost any positive quality that a psychologist can name. So psychologists basically say that a healthy mind tells itself flattering lies. The people that don't tell themselves flattering lies, that see themselves more clearly, that rate their personal qualities more plausibly, are depressed people. And so depressed people seem to have a story, the sense of themselves, that's more accurate, but also more depressing. We seem to need to tell ourselves comforting, flattering fables about ourselves in order to get through the day feeling happy.
And about our world. I mean, that's the premise of the cup is half full, half empty. I mean, I'll go about my little habitat and look for the positive. And I grew up on a diet of fairy tales, and I think that certain things come with the territory. But that I found that fascinating. I also enjoyed reading about the creative artist and madness.
Yeah. That's the other side of the coin, right? There's again, this research has been going on for a long time, but for a long time it's been sort of a cultural cliche relating madness to creative artists. So like, Vincent van Gogh carving off his ears, or Sylvia Plath gassing herself, or Virginia Woolf drowning herself in the river. But we haven't had anything beyond those anecdotes. When the scientists actually started looking into the medical records of great or eminent writers, looking into their biographies, they found that rates of mental illness, especially bipolar disorder, are much higher in creative writers than they are in the general population. So 10 times higher for fiction writers, and an amazing 40 times higher for poets.
So is creativity their salvation? To come up with a story?
Well, it's sort of, that's a really interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that. It could be a form of therapy and I bet there's a lot of truth to that. There also seems to be something, though, about a double-edged sword of creativity. It's a gift that comes with a price, and the price is, the gift is this sort of incredible energy, this sort of incredible creativity, but the price is that it tends to come with mental illness, higher rates of suicide, institutionalization, alcoholism, drug use. And
self-criticism, that you're not good enough. I think that's the human condition, and my favorite poet is John Donne, and there's always been that tension of opposites, I think, for that kind of drive. I want to tell you, Jonathan, that your book, for me, was a veritable page-turner.
Oh, thank you.
I just loved it. It took everything into consideration. It gives you food for thought. It reinforces some feelings that we have and clarifies others. It was like science in the story and the science of the story. Now, if we want to learn more about your work, where can we access you?
Oh, you could Google me and just Google Jonathan Gottschall or The Storytelling Animal. My website's www.jonathangottschall.com.
Okay, and when I put up your interview, I'm going to add a link so that people can find you, especially with the spelling. Today we have spell check.
Yes.
And we have lost.
People will need some help with the spelling, for sure.
But I really enjoyed, some of the premises that you put into aspects of the story, and reminding us how sometimes it's the bad things that we remember that are reinforced, and that's part of life simulation, and I guess taking adversity and turning it eventually into advantage. Thank you for being a wonderful guest, and I urge people to read The Storytelling Animal. You might be surprised at when people say they're always right, John, at the stories you've been telling yourself.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me on.
Be well. Affirmation of the week. Don't miss out on those imperfect opportunities. And now for the latest medical trends. Beware the tax day in April. A study found that deadly automobile accidents increase on tax day. Drivers recklessly racing to the post office to meet the deadline could be one reason. Or it might be that stressing over taxes distracts motorists and contributes to human error, according to researchers. Eating a plant-based diet rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans can reduce your risk of cancer, according to MD Anderson's Cancer Prevention Center. I keep saying this, I keep finding many studies, and eventually it will creep into the king's ear, and we will do it. A new comparative effectiveness report confirms that pelvic floor muscle training is effective for treating adult women with urinary incontinence without the risk of side effects. Daily physical exercise may reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease, even in people over the age of 80. This is according to a new study published in the journal Neurology. The EKG, which is widely used to measure electrical activity in the heart, may help identify elderly people at risk of a heart attack, said a new study, rekindling an old debate over the value of such tests in people without symptoms. So even if you don't have symptoms, it might not be a bad thing to have routinely. Ask your doctor. There are higher rates of autism in obese mothers. And chemo brain is not always to blame for cognitive declines in women with breast cancer, according to research from Missouri University. Stress and how patients manage it can affect brain function even before chemotherapy begins. So I know that if I'm upset or stressed about something, my thinking is compromised. I won't remember to do certain things because I'm distracted. So we have to pay attention to the inflammatory process of stress and how that could implicate treatment. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management, totally free, turnonyourinnerlight.com. And all the radio shows with the guest experts are archived, and you could just click on them and you go right into YouTube on my site to hear them. Subscribe to my free newsletter from turnonyourinnerlight.com. You will get the latest radio shows with the guest experts and a fresh new article on stress management and all the health tips fully delineated, emailed directly to you from turnonyourinnerlight.com. Have a wonderful week and see you on the radio.